when the most feared man in all of Los Angeles, a man who called himself the self-proclaimed most dangerous man in the city, ends up in critical condition behind bars, getting worked on by the same gang he built his whole legacy on top, you already know, something went catastrophically wrong. Federal prosecutors literally describe Big U as the self-professed most dangerous man in LA, and right now, inside a federal detention center, this man is fighting for his life in a way no street reputation can save him from. But trust me, the real story here runs way deeper than what the blogs are talking about. Because while everybody's focused on Big U getting jammed up inside, the feds are quietly connecting this man to one of the most heartbreaking murders in hip-hop history, the killing of Nipsey Hussle. And what makes it even darker is the part the media keeps conveniently leaving out. See, there's one detail buried deep inside a superseding federal indictment that changes the entire way you look at Big U Nipsey and the whole legacy of the Rolling 60s Crips. And by the end of this video, you're gonna understand why the same men Big U built his empire with may now be the biggest threat to him. Stay with me, because this story is nowhere near over. But before we get into the main revelation, you first gotta understand who Eugene Big U Henley Jr. really is and how all this even happened. Because the average person only knows the surface version of this man, and the surface version is a lie. Eugene Big U Henley Jr. is the alleged leader of the Rolling 60s Los Angeles street gang. After serving 13 years in prison for a robbery gone wrong back in 1991, Henley came home and stepped into the role of music manager and community activist. That's the image he sold to the world. Reformed OG anti-gang activist mentor to the youth music executive, helping launch careers. And for years, people bought into it. Now understand the era we're talking about. Early 1990s, South Los Angeles. The crack epidemic tearing communities apart. Gang violence at an all-time high. The Rolling 60s Crips, with around 1,600 active members, had already been tied to criminal activity for years. Big U's rise inside the gang gave him a reputation as a feared enforcer tied to drug dealing and violent robberies. And that reputation only got bigger through the 90s, as his ambition pushed him into choices that eventually led to prison. In 1991, everything collapsed. He got arrested in a sting operation after he and another individual tried to rob someone they thought was a drug dealer. What he didn't realize was the man was an undercover deputy. He got hit hard. 13 years gone instantly. Now here's where things start getting interesting. Because when Big U came home in 2004, he didn't return the way most OGs do. Nah, he came back with a strategy. After his release, Big U's claims of rehabilitation and his philanthropic work started earning him respect and credibility. He became involved in Los Angeles gang reduction and youth development programs, getting major funding to support his nonprofit efforts. He created a nonprofit called Developing Options. He got city funding, celebrity donations, NBA players like Draymond Green and Shaquille O'Neal cutting checks to his organization. And through all of it, he was building his music connections. First managing Corrupt, then linking with Death Row through Suge Knight. But the biggest piece of everything Big U built in the music industry, the relationship that made him untouchable in LA hip-hop circles, was his connection to a young Crenshaw rapper named Nipsey Hussle. Henley is recognized as a major figure in the rise of Nipsey Hussle's career. Both men were Rolling 60s. Both came from the same neighborhood, and for a while, they moved together. Big U helped put Nipsey in position. He used his street credibility and connections to open doors. And Nipsey, a man who truly loved his community and dedicated his life to uplifting it, became the greatest ambassador the Rolling 60s ever had. Now listen carefully, because what I'm about to say next ties everything together. Nipsey Hussle was murdered on March 31, 2019, shot and killed outside his own Marathon clothing store in Crenshaw. Eric Holder was convicted of pulling the trigger and is currently serving 60 years to life. That part you probably already know. But what you might not know is that the relationship between Big U and Nipsey didn't remain clean. It didn't stay brotherly. And the federal government has something to say about what that relationship allegedly looked like behind closed doors. March 19, 2025, federal agents launched what they called Operation Drawdown, a massive crackdown on the Rolling 60s Neighborhood Crips. Eugene Henley Jr., known as Big U, was one of 18 Rolling 60s members charged in a federal complaint involving a long list of crimes, including drug trafficking, conspiracy, and firearms offenses. But Big U wasn't just another name listed in the indictment. He was the name, the lead defendant. the man sitting at the top. Federal prosecutors allege that Eugene "Big U" Henley, once seen as an OG of LA's Rolling 60s who claimed to have changed his life around, was secretly extorting high-profile athletes and celebrities for protection money. According to a 107-page federal complaint, the so-called Big U enterprise operated like a mafia, allegedly carrying out extortion, robbery, fraud, and murder while hiding behind the image of community activism. At a press conference, the U.S. attorney didn't hold back. He said Big U maintained the image of an entertainment entrepreneur running a music label and somebody giving back to the Los Angeles community. But the facts alleged in the complaint paint a completely different picture. One of a murderer, thief, liar, and cheat, along with the criminals who helped him. Now here's where Nipsey Hussle enters this story in a way that should make every person watching this sit up immediately. In the federal RICO case, the indictment claims Big U was caught on wiretapped calls saying he was bigger than Nipsey and that he disciplined Hussle before his murder. Read that again. The feds with wiretaps, surveillance, and a 4-year investigation allegedly caught Big U on recorded calls saying he was bigger than Nipsey, that he disciplined Nipsey before his death. But it didn't stop there. It got even messier when a superseding indictment dropped with more details. The superseding indictment references alleged tensions involving Nipsey Hussle. Federal prosecutors claim they intercepted calls years later where Henley allegedly called himself the hunter of the Rolling 60s Neighborhood Crips while hinting at gang intimidation. And here's the part that really matters, because it ties directly into rumors that had already been circulating in the streets years before the feds got involved. The feds reportedly wanted access to a cease and desist letter Big U sent to the No Jumper podcast after an episode where Loose Cannon claimed Big U had prior knowledge of Nipsey's death before the March 2019 shooting. Think about what that means. Loose Cannon, one of Big U's own affiliates, somebody from inside the circle, went on a podcast and claimed Big U knew Nipsey was going to die. And when the episode aired, Big U didn't just deny it, he sent lawyers. Sent a cease and desist. Tried to make it disappear. And now, the federal government allegedly wants that letter as evidence. The superseding indictment also claims Henley reflected on an altercation involving Nipsey Hussle and others by suggesting he would have had a problem with any man if things hadn't smoothed over. He allegedly said the issue would have been resolved and he wouldn't be here or I wouldn't be here and he wouldn't be here or I wouldn't be here. Now, to be clear and fair to the facts, the feds have not officially accused Big U of involvement in Nipsey's murder, and that case is not part of the RICO indictment. Eric Holder Jr. remains the only person arrested, charged, and convicted for Nipsey's murder, and is currently serving 60 years to life. But if you do the math, if you look at the wiretapped calls, the cease and desist, the comments about disciplining Nipsey, the "he wouldn't be here" quote, and the fact federal investigators specifically went to Adam 22, looking for evidence tied to Big U's potential Nipsey connections, the picture that forms is murky at best. And on the streets, murky is enough. Why does all this matter inside a federal prison? Because it all comes down to one thing. Nipsey Hussle wasn't just loved by hip-hop fans. Nipsey was deeply respected by Crips everywhere. Not just the 60s, not just Crenshaw, everywhere. And when you're Big U locked inside a federal detention center filled with gang members, other Crips men who grew up blasting Nipsey Hussle's music, men who tattooed TMC on themselves, men who know every rumor about Big U's alleged issues with Nipsey, every wiretapped call that leaked out every word Loose Cannon said during that No Jumper interview, that becomes a problem no OG status can solve. Now, let's talk about what's actually happening to Big U behind bars right now, because this is the part the blogs aren't fully piecing together. After his arrest on March 19, 2025, Big U appeared for a detention hearing where the judge denied his request for bail. The judge agreed with prosecutors that there was enough evidence showing Henley was both a flight risk and a danger to the community. So, he got locked up. And from the start, things inside weren't what Big U expected. Henley claims in documents filed to the United States District Court that he's been targeted with abuse and cruelty while housed at MDC Los Angeles. On January 1, 2026, Big U was moved to the SHU, the Special Housing Unit, better known as the Whole Solitary Confinement. And this is where things get serious. In his own words, "After I was moved to SHU on January 1, 2026, my CPAP machine and plug were taken. I was allowed to use the CPAP briefly, but then it was taken away again. Since that time, I have repeatedly requested that it be returned and have explained that I am worried about serious health consequences if I go without it." Out of fear for his life, Henley wrote, "I cannot allow myself to fall asleep whatsoever." Let that sink in. The man who once called himself the most dangerous man in Los Angeles is now so afraid of what could happen to him while sleeping that he refuses to close his eyes. Without the CPAP machine and proper accommodations, he says he struggles to focus and feels physically drained. That makes it harder for him to concentrate during legal visits or review materials he receives. And it wasn't only the breathing machine. His legal mail was allegedly withheld after he was placed in solitary confinement. He also described being prevented from attending the funeral of his own son Jabari, known as Baby Huey Henley, who was murdered last October at just 34 years old. He wasn't even allowed a private viewing despite a court order approving it. Now understand how serious all this is. A man sitting in solitary denied medical equipment he says he needs to survive, denied the chance to bury his own son while conditions around him inside MDC. Los Angeles continue getting worse every day. And here's the disturbing part, nobody's connecting all together. Big U, the self-proclaimed leader of the Rolling 60s Neighborhood Crips, is locked inside a federal facility housing other gang members, other Crips, men who grew up listening to Nipsey Hussle non-stop, men who know every rumor tied to Big U's alleged issues with Nipsey. Every leaked wiretap, every statement Loose Cannon made during that No Jumper episode. See, in the streets there's a code. And when you're accused, even just accused not convicted of possibly having ties to the death of a man, an entire culture mourned that follows you behind those walls differently. The feds can say they haven't charged him with Nipsey's murder all they want, but inside a federal detention center, it's not about what you're charged with. It's about what people believe. And what people believe about Big U right now inside those halls, those units, those tiers is dangerous. The man who built his whole reputation on being untouchable is now the most touchable person in the building. Now let's break down what Big U is actually facing in court, because this case is one of the wildest federal prosecutions hip-hop has ever seen. The charges include 1 count of conspiracy to violate the RICO Act, 2 counts of conspiracy to interfere with commerce through robbery and extortion, 1 count of Hobbs Act robbery, 9 counts of attempted Hobbs Act extortion, 5 counts of Hobbs Act extortion, 1 Mann Act violation tied to prostitution, 15 counts of wire fraud, 5 counts of embezzlement, 1 count of bank fraud, 1 count of tax evasion, and 2 counts of willful failure to file tax returns. 43 counts total. And sitting at the center of all of it is a murder allegation. The indictment claims Henley murdered an aspiring artist, signed to his own unique music label, a rapper named Rayshawn Williams, after Williams released a diss track about him. The music executive allegedly paid for Rayshawn to record at a studio in Las Vegas after finding out about the diss track. Henley and his co-defendant Sylvester V. Robinson then allegedly went to Vegas to confront him. According to the feds, Henley drove Rayshawn out to North Las Vegas, shot him in the head, and dumped his body in a ditch in the desert near Interstate 15. He also allegedly told an associate to erase security footage from the studio surveillance cameras and instructed employees not to say anything about the murder. And to really understand how personal this alleged murder was, Rayshawn Williams wasn't just some random rapper. According to court records, the aspiring artist had been coached by Henley in football since he was young and had even lived with him at one point. This was somebody Big U knew personally. Somebody he mentored, somebody he brought close. And when that same person made a diss track, according to federal prosecutors, Big U drove out to Las Vegas and put a bullet in his head. And the amount of evidence the government claims to have is insane. Prosecutors say they've gathered 2,000 intercepted audio calls along with numerous hidden audio and video recordings. They also mention law enforcement reports, search warrants, criminal history records, recordings, and photographs. The total data reportedly adds up to over 60 gigabytes of material. Over 60 gigabytes. 2,000 intercepted calls. They've allegedly been listening to this man for years. Every call, every conversation. And remember, some of those calls supposedly include him talking about being bigger than Nipsey, talking about disciplining Nipsey, talking about how he wouldn't be here. And in one call, reportedly captured on a law enforcement wiretap, Henley even addressed his own dual image, directly saying, "I'm retired activist. I'll pull up on your block right now and show up and show out." That's what happened to the last ones who thought I was retired. This is the same man cashing city checks, accepting donations from NBA players, running an anti-gang nonprofit, and on those same phones, those same calls, he's allegedly talking like that. The duality almost doesn't even seem real. The only real question now is whether Big U actually has any realistic chance of walking away from this. And I'll give you the honest breakdown. First, the trial situation. Eugene Big U Henley's RICO trial, which was originally supposed to start in May 2026, has now been pushed all the way back to February 16, 2027, despite Big U objecting to the delay. His own attorneys requested more time. Big U himself reportedly wanted the trial to start as soon as possible, and that alone either points to somebody who truly believes he's innocent, or somebody who doesn't fully grasp what he's really facing. His attorney, Arturo Hernandez, cited a breakdown in communication and trust while asking to withdraw from the case. He stated the attorney-client relationship had fallen apart to the point where continuing representation would be unfair to both the client and the court. So now Big U has lost his lawyer, and he's talking about representing himself in a 4-3-count federal RICO case against the full force of the United States Department of Justice. Federal RICO cases are notoriously complicated. They require deep understanding of legal procedures, evidence rules, courtroom strategy, all skills lawyers usually spend years developing. Henley has no formal legal training. Legal experts warn that defendants who represent themselves usually struggle against the government's resources, especially when prosecutors have extensive evidence, cooperating witnesses, and years to prepare. But ironically, Big U's instincts might not be entirely wrong. Here's something people don't really talk about in the wider coverage. Federal RICO cases, despite the reputation they carry, are not automatic convictions. The government still has to prove every single count beyond a reasonable doubt. And with 43 counts, that's 43 separate battles prosecutors have to win. Big U has maintained his innocence from day one. He pleaded not guilty and has continued denying all charges since his arrest. Before turning himself in, he even posted videos online speaking directly to the public and defending himself. He understands that public opinion mattered. And in a city like Los Angeles, a city with a long, complicated history involving institutions that criminalized black communities for generations, a jury could potentially be persuaded. But even if we give Big U every possible benefit of the doubt, even if some of these charges get reduced or dismissed, the murder allegation alone is basically a life sentence if it holds up. If convicted, he could face a maximum sentence of life in federal prison. And the cooperating witnesses may end up being the thing that completely blows this case open. Big U's legal team is asking the court to force prosecutors to hand over a full set of materials tied to cooperating witnesses. They want reports, recordings, proffer statements, debrief notes, and any documents connected to cooperation agreements. They also want details on any benefits informants may have received. Plea deals, reduced sentences, money, promises made in exchange for testimony. In other words, somebody is talking, probably multiple people. And Big U is desperately trying to figure out who's cooperating and exactly what they told investigators. His co-defendants' attorneys are also arguing they have more than 1.1 million pieces of discovery to review, including tens of thousands of wiretapped calls and thousands of surveillance videos. 1.1 million pieces of discovery. Even if half of it means nothing, that's still a mountain of evidence that would challenge a whole team of lawyers, let alone one man potentially trying to defend himself from solitary confinement without a breathing machine. And here's something almost nobody is really talking about. While Big U is fighting for his legal life in federal court, the physical danger he faces inside MDC Los Angeles may be just as serious. Nipsey Hussle isn't just another rapper to the Crips community. He's a symbol, a martyr. A legend who died giving back to the neighborhood that raised him. Crips in Los Angeles, Crips in other states. Crips who never even met Nipsey personally. They all took his death personally. They all felt what it meant when the marathon stopped. And when you're Eugene Big U Henley sitting inside a federal facility while the streets are loudly whispering that you had problems with Nipsey before he died, that you disciplined him, that you said he wouldn't be here, that somebody from your own circle claimed you had prior knowledge of his murder. You are not safe inside that building. You are not safe around men who idolize Nipsey's legacy. Not even if you're an OG. Not even if you're allegedly the boss of the Rolling 60s. Maybe, especially because of that. The conditions he described: getting thrown into the hole on New Year's Day, having his breathing equipment taken away, his legal mail withheld, refusing to sleep. Out of fear, all paints the picture of a man already losing the battle on the inside before the trial even starts. The feds say he called himself the hunter, but right now, inside those walls, the roles seem completely reversed. Big U's story still isn't finished. The trial is set for February 2027. The superseding indictment keeps growing. The cooperating witnesses are talking, and somewhere inside MDC Los Angeles, a 8-year-old man who built his whole empire on fear and influence is laying awake, literally refusing to sleep because he's terrified of what might happen when he closes his eyes. The most dangerous man in Los Angeles. That's what they called him. And right now, the most dangerous place on earth for Big U might be the very cell he's sitting in. We'll be following this case every step of the way. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Big U can beat these charges? And do you think the feds are eventually going to officially connect him to what happened to Nipsey? Because based on everything we just broke down, they're getting closer. And the streets already seem to have their answer.